Historic scenes at the border, taking a short but symbolic stride in a new diplomatic direction. Donald Trump becomes the first sitting US president to enter North Korea, stepping across the DMZ with North Korean leader Kim Jongun. What was supposed to be a handshake and a quick hello turns into a 50-minute meeting on the southern side of the DMZ. At their hastily arranged meeting, Trump and Kim agreed to keep dialogue going with the first round of talks in mid-July. Plus, another trade spat might be about to blow up, this time between South Korea and Japan. Tokyo gears up to restrict key export items to Korea. We'll tell you why. So let's start with that final headline there. Japanese media reports that Tokyo will impose economic sanctions on South Korea this month amid a legal dispute concerning cases of forced wartime labor. The report says the Japanese government plans to restrict exports of 3 products from this week, with the official announcement due right about now. Seung starts us off.
While the U.S. and China agreed to a temporary trade war truce on the sidelines of last weekend's G20 summit, another trade spat might be about to erupt, this time between South Korea and Japan. According to Japan's Sankei Shimbun on Sunday, Tokyo plans to impose economic sanctions on South Korea's semiconductor and IT sectors. According to the report, from Thursday, the Japanese government will restrict exports of 3 key items, including fluorine-containing polyamide, resist and etching gas, to South Korea. The products are materials used in the semiconductor production process, as fluorine-containing polyamide is used to make smartphones and TVs. Japan accounts for about 90% of the global supply of the fluorine-containing polyamide and resist markets, and 70% of the etching gas market. Watchers say LG Electronics and Samsung Electronics, 2 of South Korea's biggest tech giants, will be impacted by the sanctions. Not only will they slow the production of smartphones and TVs from the 2 companies, the measures, if implemented, are likely to negatively impact the South Korean economy. The sanctions come amid a major economic backlash against Seoul's Supreme Court's decision last year that major Japanese companies must pay compensation to Korean victims of wartime forced labor. Seung, Arirang News.
Now, it was a small but perhaps highly symbolic step toward peace. That's the hope anyway, after US President Donald Trump rewrote the history books on Sunday afternoon by taking an unprecedented step, a number of them actually, literally over the military demarcation line and onto North Korean soil. The astonishing scenes that included South Korean leader Moon Jae-in being in the area were followed by what was supposed to be a roughly 10-minute or so greeting, which ended up lasting closer to an hour. The end result, Trump said he and Kim will relaunch stalled nuclear talks. Shin Se-min has this report.
Presidents Moon Jae-in of South Korea and Donald Trump of the U.S. expressed optimism that a meeting with North Korea's Kim Jongun at the DMZ Sunday would speed up the denuclearization process.
오늘 평화로 가는 방법을 한반도가 증명할 수 있게 되어 저는 매우 마음이 벅찹니다. 지속적인 대화는 한반도의 완전한 비핵화를 이루는 현실성이 있는 유일한 방법입니다.
Speaking shortly after the 8th Moon-Trump summit, President Moon noted that the meeting is the first time the leaders of both Pyongyang and Washington have ever met at Panmunjom, sitting on the borderline of the divided Koreas.
What we're doing today is a step, and probably it's a step in the right direction. There's a good feeling, so it could be very good. As far as another meeting, I think let's see what happens today before we start thinking about that. But it could be very important.
And part of that good feeling, says Trump, is due to a good partnership with President Moon. According to a readout by South Korea's presidential office, Moon expressed appreciation for the active role of his American counterpart, calling him a peacemaker, noting a drastic shift in mood on the Korean peninsula. A highly anticipated three-way summit between leaders Moon, Kim, and Trump did not happen, as President Moon yielded the spotlight to Kim and Trump and their meeting.
오늘 이 중심은 북미 간의 대화입니다. 트럼프 대통령님과 북한 김정은 위원장과의 상봉 그리고 대화 또 그것이 앞으로 계속된 북미 대화로 이어져 나가는 그 과정으로서 큰 의미가 있다고 생각합니다.
On denuclearization, South Korean leaders said that the dismantlement of the Yongbyon nuclear facility is believed to be the entrance of a substantive denuclearization process. President Trump, too, seemed unchanged on keeping the sanctions in place.
No rush. The sanctions are on, and I'm in no rush. I'm in no rush with Iran. I'm never in a rush. If you're in a rush, you get yourself in trouble. It's just a step. It might be an important step, and it might not. But what we're doing today is a step, and probably it's a step in the right direction. There's a good feeling, so it could be very good.
The trip to the DMZ reaffirmed the strong bilateral cooperation between Seoul and Washington and imprinted a strong image of the South Korean leader as a mediator in carrying forward the denuclearization process on the Korean peninsula. And it seems sure to have put some speed on the 2-year-old peace drive. 신사민, Arirang News.
Now, some familiar but some not so familiar faces, especially from the North Korean side, will gather when North Korea and the US restart their working-level talks on denuclearization. And a key member from the US side believes that this time Pyongyang and Washington have the incentive to make significant progress in a timely way. Won Jong-hwan with more.
Right after what was essentially a third bilateral summit with North Korean leader Kim Jongun at the Freedom House on Sunday, President Trump said lower-level talks of some kind will begin soon.
What's going to happen is over the next 2 or 3 weeks, the teams are going to start working to see whether or not they can do something. Very big stuff, pretty complicated, but not as complicated as people think.
Trump said he hopes the U.S. and North Korea can reach what he called a comprehensive deal, reiterating that speed is not the object. The new talks, he said, will be led by U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Just after President Trump's announcement, Pompeo confirmed he expects denuclearization negotiations with North Korea to resume in mid-July. Pompeo said he is excited about getting back to the negotiating table, which he thinks has a clear path forward this time.
Maybe I said it from the podium a few weeks back. We thought there might be this opportunity. And the president, by getting together with Chairman Kim today, broke through and was able to get us the opportunity to get back to the negotiating table. We think we do have a jumping-off point for these discussions, which will put us in a place where we can truly evaluate if there's a clear path forward. Having listened to Chairman Kim today, I think there is.
Without elaborating much other than saying one of a couple people regarding the lineup of the members, he explained the U.S. negotiating team will be led by Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun, which the North Koreans will be led by officials from the Foreign Ministry, just like the working level meeting which took place before Trump met Kim. There is speculation Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee will take charge. Amid reports Kim Yong-chul and Kim Hyuk-chul, the two top negotiators for the Hanoi summit, were punished for the lack of a deal in Vietnam. The breakdown was caused by a difference between U.S. demands for complete denuclearization and North Korea's demands for sanctions relief. But this time, following the abrupt but historic meeting at Panmunjom on Sunday, the working-level members are confident negotiations will bring somewhat fruitful results. 원정환, Arirang News.
North Korea's state media has reported on the historic handshake between Kim Jong-un and President Trump, calling it an amazing event and a breakthrough in denuclearization efforts. The Korean Central News Agency on Monday highlighted the friendly exchange, quoting Kim as saying their ties would continue producing good and unpredictable results. The agency said the leaders discussed the easing of tensions on the Korean peninsula, ending hostilities between North Korea and the US, and issues of mutual concern that hindered progress in the past. It also reported on the impromptu nature of the meeting, quoting Kim, who said his friendly relationship with President Trump had allowed the sudden meetup to take place. Now, President Trump's proposal to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to meet at the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom came at the very last minute, supposedly anyway, via the medium of social media. But despite the sudden, unconventional request, Kim Jong-un responded and came out to meet him. But what exactly prompted Kim to head down south for his meeting with the US president? Oh Jung-hee explains.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was only one tweet away from U.S. President Donald Trump. Saying the surprise handshake meeting at the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom was not pre-organized, Kim said,
미리 사전에 합의된 만남이 아닌가 이런 말들도 하던데 나 역시 깜짝 놀랐고 정식으로 오늘 여기서 만날 걸 제안하시는 말씀을 오후 늦은 시간에야 이렇게 알게 됐습니다.
It was a last-minute impromptu suggestion from President Trump via Twitter to meet at the demilitarized zone. But despite that, Kim decided to head south to Panmunjom with his closest aides. Accompanying him were the North's Minister and Vice Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lee Yong-ho and Choi Sun-hee, the core figures in the North's denuclearization talks with the U.S. Also spotted at Panmunjom were Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Chang-sun, the chief secretary, and Kim's closest aides, Jo Yong-won from the ruling party's Organization and Guidance Department, and Hyun Song-wol, now in charge of protocol. Some watchers say Kim Jong-un could have taken this as an opportunity to show North Korean citizens his status as a proud leader meeting the U.S. president upon Washington's request. But at the same time, there are also views Kim took the handshake encounter seriously as an opportunity to seek a breakthrough in the stalled nuclear negotiations. By highlighting his relationship with President Trump, Kim clearly showed Pyongyang wants to continue talking with the U.S. rather than return to hostilities. Fresh momentum for dialogue was created between Pyongyang and Washington through Kim and Trump's historic encounter at Panmunjom. And it's notable how this momentum was revived by the interaction between the top leaders themselves rather than between working-level officials, coming after their recent exchange of friendly letters. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, for an expert's take on what was a remarkable weekend, I'm glad to say we're joined on Skype by Dr. Mark P. Barry, an independent Asian affairs analyst who has followed North Korea-US relations for the past 3 decades. Dr. Barry, I want to get your reaction to what we saw at the DMZ. President Trump crossing the border into North Korea, Kim and Trump smiling and cracking jokes, the leaders of the two Koreas and Trump together, all good. But did this impromptu meeting mean something more, or was it merely theater?
It has its theatrical aspect, but the key thing is that since the Singapore summit, nothing could happen last summer, and nothing really of significance could happen over the fall in terms of working level negotiations. So what we have now is an understanding that the North Koreans will have their foreign ministry people dealing with State Department people. We won't see Kim Young-chol involved in it because he's involved in intelligence. And it looks like John Bolton is sort of out of the picture because he didn't even show up in Panmunjom, as far as I know. So this means that we could look at the model of the negotiations over the agreed framework from June through October of 1994. We could look to the model of the six-party talks, particularly what was achieved from the summer of 2005 onward, all of which was carried out on the Foreign Ministry and State Department level. So I think that's where the real payoff will be. But I believe Trump is correct. It's going to take time, and that's why he's in no rush.
Yes, and what a lot of people noticed on Sunday was that President Trump didn't use the word denuclearization once, in public anyway, on Sunday. Do you think the US now accepts the North won't give up their nuclear weapons / ticket to survival, really, and a middle ground is emerging that both sides can be happy with?
I think you're hinting at it. I think there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say, and it can look like certain nuclear materials are put in canisters under U.S. or international supervision. The Yongbyon main reactor can be shut down. You can do a variety of things that will politically, optically look acceptable, and particularly if the IAEA is involved, then I think nobody can complain. The North will never actually give up all of its nuclear weapons, but this was all along from the early 1990s on an attention-getting mechanism so that the North could begin to deal with the United States on a level of more or less equal so that the North could fend off the increasing pressure from China.
Well, speaking for people here on the Korean Peninsula, I think a lot of us are just happy to see no nuclear tests or ICBM launches over the past year and a half, 2 years or so. Now, President Trump seemed to suggest the US could be looking into possibly lifting sanctions during the denuclearization negotiations in return for some progress. This is something he hadn't really mentioned before. Do you think that would be a good idea for the Trump administration?
It's being suggested that rather than lifting sanctions, that they can be, quote, suspended. Now, whether that's technically and practically possible, I don't know. But again, it's the optics. So if there's a way that the United States, and in particular in its role on the United Nations Security Council, can get the appropriate sanctions committees to agree to a temporary suspension of certain sanctions, certain specific ones, that may be a sufficient enough gesture. So again, it's a matter of working out a formula with clear-cut communication by which the North can find that that next step is acceptable.
Now, finally, in those rather chaotic scenes that we witnessed on Sunday at the DMZ, President Trump did make an offer for the North Korean leader Kim Jongun to visit the White House. What do you make of that?
President Trump said a year ago that he would eventually invite Kim to Washington. I don't think that's where the next summit will be, a more formal so-called third summit. I think Kim wants Trump to come to Pyongyang and do what he did with Moon Jae-in last September. So I think that is more likely. And if Trump feels he needs to reciprocate by inviting Kim to the United States, you have Honolulu, Hawaii, you have Anchorage, Alaska, without Kim coming to the mainland. Or if there's a necessity, Kim can come to New York for the opening of the high-level meeting of the United Nations General Assembly in September. That's perfectly legitimate.
Okay, so you think there is a possibility there now that President Trump crossed the border in that symbolic way, that he could go to Pyongyang for a summit with North Korea at some point in the future?
Once there's enough achievement on the ground that Trump can defend, that President Moon can defend, that the United Nations can defend, and I think it has to happen by early this fall, because the closer you get to January, the more the primary season starts to become overbearing, and it obfuscates everything else.
Well, thank you very much for your insights, Dr. Barry. Unfortunately, we are out of time. It's a pleasure having you on, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Now, in other news, the outlook is gloomy for South Korea's exports, with the latest data showing outbound shipments have fallen for the 7th month in a row in June. The Trade Ministry said on Monday Korea's total exports were around $44.2 billion last month. That's down more than 13% compared to the same period last year. The ministry attributed the fall to the worsening trade dispute between the US and China, as well as falling semiconductor prices. Imports, they also fell by more than 8% on year in June to about $40 billion. South Korean star pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin has received the golden ticket. His efforts for the LA Dodgers this season have seen him selected for the MLB All-Star Game, becoming just the fourth South Korean in history to get the nod. Watchers say the 32-year-old's audition for the first time in his 7-year MLB career is an indication of just how well he's been playing. Ryu's inclusion means he follows in the footsteps of other Korean baseball legends, Park Chan-ho, Kim Byung-hyun and Chu Shin-soo. The All-Star Game will take place at Progressive Field in Cleveland on July 10th. And sticking with sports, South Korean golf superstar Park Sung-hyun has notched up her 7th LPGA career win and is set to reclaim the #1 spot in the world rankings. Park won the 2019 Walmart NW Arkansas Championship on Sunday, finishing with an 18 under 195, beating 3 golfers by 1 shot. 2 other South Koreans, Park In-bi and Kim Hyo-ju, were among the runners-up. With her 2nd win of the season, the current world #2 is set to return to the top spot on the Rolex Women's World Golf Rankings for the 4th time in her career. Of the 17 tournaments of this season, 6 South Korean players have a combined 8 wins. Tension is mounting in Hong Kong as it marks the 22nd anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong from Britain to China on July 1st, 1997, and a massive protest march is taking place on the island as we speak. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Jongun, who's sitting in for our Hong Yu at Arirang's news centre today. So Jongun, tell us why today's protest march is causing so much concern.
Well, Mark, the July 1st anniversary always draws protests, but this year it's expected to be larger than usual because of widespread opposition to the controversial extradition bill, a government proposal to allow suspects to be extradited to mainland China to face charges. In opposition to the bill, protests have been continuing over the past weeks, with more than 1 million taking part. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam had already postponed debate on the extradition bill indefinitely, but protesters want the legislation formally withdrawn, as well as the resignation of Lam. Security has been heightened around the streets as the government is expected to hold an anniversary event with Lam in attendance. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is calling for immediate climate action, warning that the world is facing a grave climate emergency. Speaking at the Abu Dhabi climate meeting on Sunday, the UN chief called on governments to stop building new coal plants by 2020, cut greenhouse emissions by 45% over the next decade, and overhaul fossil fuel-driven economies with new technologies like solar and wind. Guterres painted a grim picture of how rapidly climate change is advancing, adding its outspacing efforts to address it. He also praised the Paris Climate Accord, but said even if its promises are fully met, the world still faces a 3-degree temperature rise by the end of the century.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. And South Korea's 52-hour work week goes into effect today for 1 million workers employed in bus companies, finance, broadcasting and education services. While the shorter workweek law actually came into force 1 year ago for firms with more than 300 workers, 21 sectors were granted a 1-year grace period to help them adjust. The initiative was introduced to boost productivity and consumption through flexible work hours and extra leisure time. The law will be introduced at medium-sized firms next year and small enterprises with less than 50 employees from 2021. Now, ready-to-cook meal kits, which contain fully prepared ingredients, are changing the cooking game for a great many Koreans out there. Park Sung-hyun with more.
Meal kits have made cooking a lot easier for this working mom who has to balance both work and family. Because they come with pre-measured and pre-cut ingredients, meal kits can help reduce the time and effort that goes into cooking.
Washing and cutting ingredients is a lot of work, but they are all included and pre-washed. Buying ingredients one by one leaves a lot of leftovers, but with meal kits, I like that I can cook delicious meals efficiently.
The popular cooking boxes come in a range of flavors and menus. With a variety of sauces, oils, and spices, meal kits are a popular choice for making exotic dishes for special occasions. In fact, Korea's meal kit market is expected to grow from an estimated $34.6 million in 2019 to over $600 million in the next 5 years. And with a growing number of double-income families and single-person households, major food retailers like CJ are jumping in the race.
With R&D capability like no other and based on know-how from top chefs' recipes, we will develop really tasty meals that consumers want.
At around $20 for 2 servings, meal kits don't come cheap, and cooking boxes ordered online take at least 1 day to ship. And because meal kits usually consist of fresh ingredients like meat and vegetables, they have a short shelf life. Park Sung-hyun, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's Agriculture Ministry is encouraging the voluntary registration of pets from July to August. According to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, those who register their pets or modify the information of registered animals during the 2-month period will be exempt from any possible fines. Currently, pet owners in Korea are required to register dogs over 3 months of age. Starting September, local governments, they're going to start cracking down on unregistered animals and impose fines on violators. Registration and modification of information can be done through public offices, designated agencies, and animal.go.kr.
Good morning. Rain is in the forecast for southern parts of the country. In Chungcheong provinces and southern regions will be affected by a weak trough of low pressure, while Jeju will see monsoon rains. So up to 30 millimeters is in the forecast through this evening, while Chungcheong provinces will see light sprinkles. Meanwhile, the rest of the country will be under mostly sunny skies with high UV rays. So a soupy afternoon is in the forecast with warm highs at 29 degrees Celsius here in the capital, and Daegu should get up to 30 degrees. We are now in July, one of the hottest months of the year here in Korea. In fact, the temperatures will continue to rise, and by Friday, Seoul could see readings soaring to 33 degrees Celsius, while sunny skies and high humidity will dominate this week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Until next time, goodbye.